Do you remember the creation story? How the universe came into being and how God gave laws to all those particles, and eventually the universe was created, our earth. You remember? You remember the story of the coming of light? You remember when there was a problem and something had to be created to solve the problem in the water? You remember all those plants, animals, and finally that special being came, the human being. Remember? How long did it take for all this to happen? How long did it all take for humans to finally arrive on the earth? The answer is in this strip. At first, there was gas and dust and cold. The darkness and blackness was immense. Then the earth began to spin on itself. As it spun, it started to cool off, and time went on. It took a long time as the earth was very, very hot and was spinning and spinning around on itself, and time went on. Eventually, the earth began to cool, little bit by little bit over time, and it began to form a crust on the surface. It was spinning and cooling, and the formation of the crust continued over time. But underneath the surface, it was still very hot, and the hot gases were clamoring to come out. And then they did. There was a huge commotion as the trapped gases fought to come out, and time went on. The earth went around the sun and it spun around itself. There were still hot gases churning inside, and they needed to expand and get out. So they did. This created a hot, stinky, smelly, ugly cloud of a mess. Time went on. And it took such a long time for things to slowly cool and for things to settle down. Time went on. And this time it was so hot that the rains would fall and it couldn't stay on the surface. It was too hot. The rains would hit the surface, and the surface was so hot it would shoot back up, and then it would cool down and fall back down, and immediately it was so hot it shot up back. It took a very long time Slowly, the earth became cool enough that the rains could stay on the surface and the water flowed into all the cracks and crevices of the earth. It took such a long time to get to this point, and time went on. There was trouble. Even as things settled down, many substances and minerals were washed into the earth, which threw off the balance of the earth. Time went on. But this time, there was an answer to this trouble. There arrived on the earth the first form of life, a tiny jelly blob that was made of only one cell. These unicellular jelly blobs were the only life on earth for a long time. Then other life forms began to appear. Multicellular organisms that share the jobs of living. Some cells focused on eating, some were in charge of moving. And time went on. Look how far we have come. There were lots of experiments going on in the waters. Plants and animals were in their very early forms. Some experiments were more successful than others. Do you remember those trilobites? They were not so successful. There came a time when the plants that were living in the water had developed a way to make their own food, well enough that they could venture on the land. These plants invaded the land, and after a long time, they prepared the land for other plants and for other animals to live on. There were many other experiments going on. Look how far we have come, and time went on. One experiment that was going on in the water was an animal in the water with a rod in its body. The rod provided support for the animal. These were the first fishes, and there were many different kinds. On land, there were lots and lots of plants, and because the plants provided the food for the animals, many animals came to occupy the land. There were lots of insects and loads of amphibians. But these animals still needed to be close to the water. Some amphibians were very big. And time went on. As these animals came to the earth, there were sounds also. The first voice that broke the silence on the earth was the voice of the frogs. All of these experiments have been going on, and the first voice can be heard on the earth. But where were we? The animals developed to the point that they could live further and further away from the water. And time went on. Their dry skin helped. The experiments continued, and the reptiles came to the earth. Some were small and some were very, very large. They were so large that they moved across the land. Their thundering steps could be heard all around. The experiments continued over time, and time went on. There appeared animals with feathers and with fur to cover their skin. Well, where were we? Time went on. And then the mammals came on. I wonder where we humans were. And time went on. Look at how far we have come. And where were humans? There were no human beings. The experiments continued over time. There appeared animals with feathers and with fur to cover their skin. Well, where were we? That's our story. See the red strip? This is the time of the human beings. The red strip shows the time of the human beings. All of the human beings, from the first human being to the babies born today, fit into this segment of our black strip, just this red strip. The time of human beings is so tiny compared to the whole strip. You can see how long it took for the air to be prepared for humans to arrive on it. This strip represents the 4 billion years that our earth had existed before humans arrived. This is our story and the timing of human beings' existence.